Hello, everyone. It's interesting I get to follow someone who's just speaking about music and about music having a voice to speak for everyone else. Like he just stated, I was accepted and I won a contest as a songwriter, Song of Songwriters Benefit, where I now specifically use my voice to write songs for young children with illnesses, sicknesses, and I write them specific songs for whatever the situation is with their name in it, and I use my voice to help out. Actually, I've always chose to walk on the right side of freedom and equality, peace and love, and all those ideals that this nation was once entrenched are the ideals that inspire me. My voice, my presentation today will reflect my voice in this nation's history. Um, does America actually have a cultural heritage, and if so, what is it, and how can it affect change throughout the rest of the world? My interpretation today will reflect how my voice in terms of the history of this nation and peace and love has inspired my voice as a poet. So I will be reciting some of my poetry as well that was inspired by change in this nation and things that has affected other nations that's inspired me and pained me. I remember I was once denied a publication in one particular journal because they felt as though the things I was speaking about was too graphic and too strong and it might chase people away. But they gave me a lot of respect for having the courage to say certain things that most poets and most writers were afraid to speak on. And those are things that happen throughout the nation that has pained me. Um, One particular poem that I will begin with before I start my presentation was called White Picket Fence, and it was something that it was published more than likely by multiple journals, and it says the White Picket Fence. The elms spoke evenly to one another over matters of the state, then they began branching off into a distant silence, leaving all others hanging on a limb. You always seem to question why all the stars in Minnesota's sky would break through the night like pieces of shattered glass. They would shine so loud that you would hear them screaming out your name. When you were a small child, that you play hopscotch with a soda can that you crushed beneath your right foot, then began hopping and skipping over numbered pavement back and forth on one leg, then two within a chalked out figure. I did, and for some strange reason, that chalked out figure always knew how to pronounce my full name and pronounce it correctly. The reason why I'm beginning with that is because it's called White Picket Fence. And when I think of white picket fences, I think of borders. When I think of borders, I think of restrictions, trespassing, and invasions. When I think of invasion as an American, I think of this country, and I think of my Cherokee Indian heritage. I think of Native Americans and their history in this nation. I might touch on some of it, or maybe I'll just pass right through that. Native Americans have a rich culture littered with struggle, strife, and success. Their stories are steeped in tradition, spirituality, and closely tied with Mother Nature. Many aspects mainstream culture adapted from Native American cultures. Symbols such as the sun on the New Mexico flag are actually taken straight from Native American culture. Other symbols often used are teepees, totem poles, peace pipes, and moccasins. Several Native American cultural facts that may help in understanding the rich history Native Americans and important role they played in shaping modern culture today. I would now like to move on to Indian Ten Commandments and how it affects us and how it can change the world. Commandment number 1, treat the earth and all dwell within with respect. Number 2, remain close to the Great Spirit. Number 3, show great respect for your fellow human beings. Number 4, work together for the benefit of all mankind. Number 5, give assistance and kindness whenever it is needed. Number 6, do what you know to be right. Number 7, look after the well-being, mind, and body. Number 8, dedicate a share of your efforts to the greater good. Number 9, be truthful and honest at all times. And number 10, take full responsibility for your actions. Now I'll just touch on how all those things have affected me and my writing and how I feel as though change the world if most people or most nations focus on those things. Number 1, treat the earth and all that dwell within with respect. I wrote a poem once called Rondo Chelsea Piers, is my poetic example of first commandment, treating the earth and all that dwell within with respect. Seagulls unleash themselves into the wind just like a blowflower after it's been blown. Children racing towards the dock's edge, pause then stare, above with sunny-side eyes that appear loose and runny. This is the view of the massive bedroom of a Chelsea loft. People say seagulls unleash cobalt blue. It's a direct expression of our taste and tells the story of how we spend our time. Walking towards the dock, you will be greeted with the stench of river. Seagulls unleash. And that is my interpretation of respecting the earth and all that within it. Number 2, remain close to the Great Spirit. Everything in Native American culture is considered to contain a spirit. Everything has ties to nature and is thought through and carefully produced. From native plants and animals to housing to the weather became a part of the culture in Indian life. Animals are revered as spirits, and although they are hunted and killed, their skins and hides were used as clothing and drums. Their meat is never wasted, and their spirits live on in the minds of the tribes. Plants are cultivated and harvested and used for various things, such as dyes for blankets. The rain and sun are considered to be gods, giving a sign to the Indians as a change of season. Basically, if you look at just the two of those, remaining close to the Holy Spirit and respecting the earth, if we took the time to appreciate what we have in our life, what's around us, rather than, especially during modern times, a lot of times people don't appreciate what's in their life and what's natural in terms of nature, in terms of, there's just a lot of things that people nowadays don't take into account. I wrote a poem one time about human waste, and the human waste I was referring to was a life that was being wasted and a life that's being slaughtered. It was back in 2012, and I created a poem about that, and it was published, I believe, in Diverse Quarterly and maybe a few other publications. It was inspired by someone who actually was the former nanny for President Obama, and this is a person who was on a run and feared for her life because of the fact that in her country she was people of her gender were being killed because of their beliefs, and they were being slaughtered, and they're considered human waste in their modern society. The poem was called Croissant by Pruning Hydrangeas. Transsexual's body found floating in a backed up sewage canal. Climbing vines were dismantled, chopped down to the root. Smashed out cigarette butts rotting beneath hands and arms. Flesh, half-used lipstick, cracked face powder, compact eye makeup, concealer, and her bloated body became washed up litter for cats. And this took place in Indonesia, and I just felt that it affected me, and it touched me that someone would be murdered and slaughtered by actually an army soldier and treated as waste. It was something that it inspired me to create a poem that would hopefully affect change, and I was flattered that it was actually published all around the world. Even though a lot of journals were afraid to publish it, but I was grateful that some did tell that story. I would further talk about Indians and their ideals, theories of Indian nature. The early romantic view of idealized Native Americans began with Columbus. In his writings, he seemed at times to believe he found an earthly paradise and spoke of the inhabitants as very gentle and without knowledge of what evil is, nor do they murder or steal. As time went on, philosophers such as John Locke described this noble savage as innately good, corrupted only by his unfortunate contact with European settlers and explorers. Certain opinions were that Indians were superior animal species, part of the natural world, but easily corrupted by sophisticated European ways. In proportion as he becomes sociable and a slave to others, he becomes weak, fearful, mean-spirited. That was some views of what Europeans felt that Native Americans were when they came to this country. According to one historian, most Europeans thought of all Indians as heathens, irreligious people in need of Christian teaching. They had come from the Garden of Eden, had not been to the New World for very long. One philosopher summed up his view in the following quotation: "Marvel you not at the thin population of America, nor at the rudeness and ignorance of its people, for you must accept the inhabitants of America as young people, younger 1,000 years at least than the rest of the world." And that was one person's interpretation of what they discovered when they came to the New World. I move on to commandment number 3, to show great respect for your fellow human beings. Again, back in 2009, I wrote a poem that was inspired by another person that was murdered in Puerto Rico. It was a revolution. Why hate love? It's hard, but fix as you would a gas leak, it's dangerous. Love again and again, despite forces that tell you otherwise to hate. How I fall in love a lot, most of the time with books. We love too much, earth be quaking into hate. Fame, Adele, you make me want to fall in love. When love feels wrong, it usually is, and when it is, it feels more like hate. And that was a poem I wrote called More Love Than Hate. And it was basically about spreading love, not hate. I will move on to commandment number 6. Do what you know to be right. It seems simple, but so hard for people to actually do. I actually went through the headlines in the past few days. One of the headlines was Al-Qaeda militants attack airport in southern Yemen and feign attempt to rob ATM cash foil, guard beaten up, 5 people were shot at a birthday party in Lowell, Massachusetts was a report. Teen girl sexually assaulted by 3 boys. Photos leaked just before her teen suicide. She was only 17. I felt that to be tragic. Her suicide note read, and she posted it on, I believe, Twitter before she killed herself. My life is over. I have a reputation for a night I don't even remember, and the whole school knows. I mean, it shows you social media is very powerful. I mean, I could never imagine if I was to even think about killing myself at 17, I would post it on social media for the whole world to see. But it's just very sad that that young teenage girl felt that way, that she killed herself over something that she had no recollection of, and she was more interested in how other people felt about it, how other people would see her, and how she would be perceived by others rather than how she saw herself. Which took me back to my own life when from 1st grade through 4th grade, I had a best friend that was molested, and I was a kid, 5 years old through 8 years old, who became a victim of it, not because it happened to me, but because I was getting first-hand accounts, and as a 5-year-old and I couldn't talk, I had no idea what to do. So I just listened to my best friend from 1st grade through 4th grade. The poem I wrote about that was called But Father Jose Told Me Not to Tell. He asked if I was feeling weak. Thin, roughly shaped ribbons of peeled up potato skins at his feet. He asked if I was feeling weak. Slippery road, water main leak, tires lose traction, car engine yields. He asked if I was feeling weak. Then roughly shaped ribbons of peeled flesh, afternoons every day. See, day after day we'd meet. Books shut, pants down, doors locked, tea kettle seeped, flesh. Afternoons every day. See, Picasso faces, blue period set in cubism form, crushed flesh every afternoon, every day. See, day after day we'd meet. Books shut. And that was the story of my best friend who was being molested every day by Father Jose at our Catholic school, Bishop Nava, back home. And I was a kid who couldn't do anything because back then people didn't take it as seriously as I think people take it now. I mean, I was a priest, no one would even paid attention to you back then because they thought you were just making up a story. But commandment number 7, look after well-being, mind and body. Commandment number 8, dedicate a share of your efforts to greater good. Like I said, I try to help out as many causes I can through my voice, through my music, through my writing. I'm currently writing a story, a poetry narrative for a film that's being created by an Indian filmmaker that discovered me on Poet and Writers, and it's going to be a narrative based on a war soldier that comes back to America, finds himself homeless in New York City, living in homeless shelters, and it's going to be a poetry narrative. This particular writer actually won first place at Tribeca Film Festival in 2014, so I'm definitely looking forward to writing this story with him as well and see how we can explore that soldier's voice, that homeless soldier's voice that came back to America after serving his country and now he has no place to go. Commandment number 9, be truthful and honest at all times. And number 10, going back to number 10, take full responsibility for all of your actions. In closing, does America actually have a cultural heritage? And if so, what is it? How can it affect change throughout the rest of the world? I believe America does have a cultural heritage, and it's the same cultural heritage that we all have, and it's called innate goodness. Every nation has an indigenous history that existed before corruption and before greed. I believe that we maintain the heritage of civilization, preserve the indigenous people ideals of every nation and mankind as human nature before fear took over, the fear of war, the fear of the unknown, which is essentially the root of all, the fear of the unknown. Native American culture ended with the fear of the unknown, and war became the solution, and war seems to still be the solution. And we respected life as did the indigenous people, my ancestors, and yours. Together we in turn can preserve the goodness in us all and set out to effect change throughout the rest of the world for the betterment of all. Thank you very much.